Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a live webinar on the organizational project delivery journey. This webinar specifically highlights stage 2, standardized project delivery, to stage 3, organizational project delivery, and what that evolution from resistance to acceptance looks like. My name is Rachel Henches. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at the PMO Squad, joined with my colleague, Joe Puz, and he will be going through, waving, friendly, of course. He'll be going through exactly what that looks like from a kind of standpoint of what each of those stages means today and how you can go about transitioning from that standardized project delivery stage to that organizational acceptance and organizational project delivery. So, Joe, I won't waste any time. I'll kick it right back over to you to say hello to everybody, of course, and to get us started today.
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for finding time on a Friday to join us. We've, as Rachel mentioned, we've had a couple of these sessions before. So at the beginning here, in the past, we talked about what is OPD, what is system dynamics. We're not going to get into that today. We do have all of those sessions recorded and out on YouTube, so you can catch up if you need to. But a reminder for everybody of what the journey looks like. Right, we are a 5-stage journey that organizations travel, right? This is not about the PMO. This is about the organization and how it evolves in its capability to deliver projects as an organization. As Rachel mentioned, today we're going to be talking about moving from stage 2 to stage 3. And I think this is probably the most challenging stage of the entire journey. A reminder for everybody, we did our research report this year, 2024 research report. And in that report, we asked everybody, which stage of the journey is your organization in? And the survey results came back and had a 25% or a quarter of the respondents have made it to this stage. 51% are still within that ad hoc or standardizing stage. So this is really the breakthrough stage, moving from how do we create standards that may be used as a team into an organization which now accepts and buys into what we're doing, where we eventually move into strategic alignment and then, of course, value generation. So this is critical. For me, of all the stages within the journey, getting to stage 3 is the hardest. It's the longest. It's the most challenging. It requires the most of the leaders. And we're going to dig into that today during the discussion. If you do have questions, obviously throughout our comments, just drop them into the chat and we'll hopefully have some time at the end to be able to take those. So, as I mentioned, this is the most difficult stage. And the reason for that is you're moving into acceptance. You're getting to the point of, at standardized, we in the project delivery space are determining how to execute projects, right? We're building our methodologies, we're implementing our systems. And if people don't accept it, that doesn't really slow us down. We're going to continue to do that. But at this stage, we're trying to get widespread acceptance across the enterprise for what we've implemented. And this is where the challenge comes into play. So what I would ask of all of you right now, where do you see resistance in your organization today? It could be resource management, maybe it's portfolio management, intake, training, your PPM systems. Pop into chat today where your organization provides some pushback or resistance to what your PMO is trying to push out through the organization. And again, I won't wait to capture them, but I want others to see you're not alone, right? Other organizations, right? 49% of the organizations haven't made it to this stage of acceptance. So culture certainly is one of those areas that there's pushback on as well. So we're going to address some of these. We're going to go through these. We only have 20 minutes, right? So we're going to move pretty quickly through all of these items, but we want everybody to be sharing your thoughts, right, as we move through these different stages. So to know where we are headed, we also need to know where we've been. So at standardized, within this set of the organization, and if you recall, we go through 7 standard items within each stage to evaluate where your organization exists. So the structure within the organization for standardized delivery is you're really working at the team level, right? Each project is uniquely doing their piece of work following your standards. But outside of those project teams, you don't have the organization working collectively yet. So all of the org structure related to project delivery is only within the project teams themselves. Then when we think about the capability of the organization, it stays within that teams, right? We've evolved from the individual contributor into a project team, but you're not really getting functional or departmental or enterprise capability out of project delivery yet. Org acceptance, really limited, right? You don't have broad-based acceptance for what's trying to get accomplished with project delivery. The portfolio of work that the project team works on is typically related to a functional area, maybe an IT portfolio or a marketing portfolio, but it hasn't reached out to an enterprise portfolio yet. The key dynamic or key component of system dynamics are feedback loops, which we've talked about in the past. So feedback loops were accidental in the beginning, but now they become intentional, but they're still limited, right? It's not broad-based appeal. Project delivery is intentional, but tactical. We haven't reached that strategic component yet. And then the people, eventually we're getting trained project managers that are working on projects, but it's not enterprise-wide in nature. So that's standardized, right? The organization has learned how to build standard process, standard methodology, standard tools, and within project teams, that gets executed. But that's limiting, right? We're not getting organizational acceptance to see the true value across the full enterprise. So this is the transition into stage 3. So at this stage, we're looking for acceptance, right? I say people have put in resistance, right? Project standards have resistance, and the culture, resources, intake, multiple avenues of resistance. When you get through stage 3, resistance is now gone, and you've worked on acceptance. So what are the components? Again, we're going to look at the same 7 criteria to evaluate here. First one, org structure. We now have a PMO. You're getting away from the project team, and you've now have a group within the organization that's accountable for project delivery, a PMO. Generally speaking, it hasn't become an enterprise PMO yet, but each organization is going to be different. But at minimum, there's a functional PMO that's going to be in place. Departmental capability has moved from team-based into departments. And what we start seeing is an entire function that's working in concert to deliver their body of work, right? It's not just the project team that's benefiting, it's an entire group or department or function within the organization. So it's the evolution of project delivery across the organization. Acceptance has now become organizational, right? That's the whole stage. The name of this stage is organizational project delivery. So the organization and the varying departments are now coming together to create an organizational portfolio, and everyone is understanding that we have to work together to be able to accomplish all of the work we need to do. There's a dependence on one another to be able to get that done. So governance and intake go across the organization. There's one way to be able to do that work. Annual planning most likely now is occurring, taking into account resource availability in the portfolio across the organizational level. The feedback loops are, again, intentional, but now they're widespread across the entire organization. So remember, feedback loops are looking at the entire system. So it's not just the project delivery system, but the other departments within the organization and what feedback they're receiving. So it could be your finance department with your outside banks. If there's a recession ongoing, the recession is putting, or currently as we have kind of a slowdown now, that's putting interest rate pressures on an organization, which means your cash availability may be limited, which means your discretionary project may be reduced within your portfolio. So the outside economy is impacting the project delivery in the portfolio of the organization. So the feedback loops are widespread throughout all of the work and across the organization, a major change from what we do in stage 2. Project delivery moves from tactical to more strategic. At this point, we start thinking about how do we accomplish what we need to achieve yearly objectives, yearly goals, strategic alignment within the organization. We haven't quite gotten the whole organization to work as one to do that strategically. That's coming in stage 4. But this is where it begins, right? Where we stop moving away from tactical work and into strategic work. And people within the organization start making those decisions without the PMO, where one department sees another department doing tactical items that are not aligned to strategic items. They start working together, providing that feedback to one another, moving towards a strategic delivery. So again, it's not all on a PMO to deliver this. It's an organization that's delivering this. From a people perspective, of course, we have the dedicated project delivery resources, whether you're agile or whether you're traditional in nature. It doesn't really matter how you deliver, but you've got dedicated people who are delivering. And what's really exciting when you get to this stage is you're now training the organization so that our terminology, our processes are all understood. Our systems are understood across the organization. So when you talk about change management, somebody in another department understands that. When you ask about how to approve a resource that gets requested in your PPM system, people within the organization understand how to receive that request, review that request, and approve that request. Training allows the organization to understand, and it spreads the tentacles of project delivery throughout the organization so everybody's working collectively to get that done. So these 7 items are a big switch from OPD stage 2 to OPD stage 3. Questions, comments, thoughts from anybody, drop them in the chat about these 7 items in the evolution from stage 2 to 3. The goal at this point of stage 3 is we're moving for acceptance from top of the organization to bottom of the organization and throughout the organization so that we're collectively working on one way of working for projects, even though each project's unique, and that we're creating and using a standard portfolio to ensure that we're all looking at the same body of work to be able to work together on. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. And again, not the PMO, not just project delivery teams, but this is for the entire organization. So what does it look like, right? How do you actually do the transition, right? There's no flashing lights that go off in the organization that say, hey, we made it. We finally reached stage 3, right? It's something that you just feel in the organization that becomes part of it. Question Mary has here, the org training, how or who usually conducts that? Usually that's the PMO that initiates and sets up and delivers that training. Could be different varieties of training there. What I would recommend, of course, is you have training geared towards sponsors and executives, champions of your projects. You have training in place for project delivery resources so they know what it's like to be a team member, training on the systems that you use. And let's be realistic, there's accidental project managers who are always going to be running projects that haven't been approved through the portfolio. So you want to give those people the basic skills on how to be able to execute projects as well, even if it's not formal. I think we're we're living in fantasy land if we think that there aren't projects being run outside of the PMO's control. So let's help those folks. Let's give them some of the skills to be able to deliver projects better. So great question, Mary. So this is the key, the actual transition. What does that look like and how do we get there? Right. And if you've attended in the past, we kind of walked through stages for this as well. First and foremost, you have to recognize that there is resistance in the organization. You're trying to gain acceptance. In order to change, right, OCM, organizational change management, in order to get the organization to evolve and move to accept what you're doing, on the past, we said you need to be a leader. It has now evolved. At standardization, you do need to be a leader. At acceptance, you must be a leader. There isn't any way around this other than for you to own this transition. It doesn't rest on the organization's executives. It doesn't exist on your boss. If you're running the PMO, you have to lead this change. In order to get that change in place, you have to be trusted. You have to be able to gain support from your peers, and you have to be able to identify and utilize influencers throughout and across the organization. To do that, leadership is required. And many PMOs fail to gain acceptance across the organization because the PMO leader is limited in his or her capability to be able to be a leader to truly drive this change. This is what separates the project manager from the PMO leader, right? And a lot of folks who get promoted into that role who were good PMs and maybe not great PMO leaders, it isn't about running projects anymore. At this point of the journey, you have to lead a department to gain acceptance across the organization. What does that look like? The organization doesn't know. They're not experts in project delivery, so they don't know what it looks like. You have to have a vision. You have to be able to share that vision and get people to be on board with what that's about. Because if they can't see where they're headed with this, you may be able to describe it in your own mind, but if you can't lay out that vision to them, they can't see and they won't trust you. They won't follow you in where you're trying to go. So a clear vision is a must to get through this. There must be a successful catalyst, right? If people see the vision, but then question, does it make sense? What they need is something to see the vision and then understand what success looks like. Some sort of catalyst that will then enable a chain reaction for the transformation to take place. Most likely, this is an internal program, project, initiative that you were working on where project delivery got something across the finish line that in the past your organization struggled with. So use that success to pair with your vision to enable people to build trust in you and to be able to go deliver. How do you deliver? With a plan, right? If people see a vision, understand the catalyst, but all of this change is going to take place and there's no plan of how that's going to happen, you're going to lose people, right? You and we are project delivery experts and professionals. We have to be able to build a plan to be able to go execute the steps so that our vision gets implemented. So a leader with a vision that uses an event to build a plan and ultimately get a team. So what team here does not mean just your PMO. This is the other people in the organization who believe in your vision, right? You may have an OCM specialist. You may have other department leads. You may have consultants if you need to be, but you are not going to achieve this by yourself. The PMO leader alone cannot move an organization from resistance to acceptance. So surround yourself with the people within the organization who are your champions and who believe in what your vision is, and utilize them to be able to drive acceptance across the organization. I've been there myself, right? Running PMOs where we're trying to get resource management implemented, and there's that one department head who refuses to go along with it. They won't go into the system, they won't review the requests, and they don't approve the assignments. So how do you get that person to follow along? How do we get them to accept? The easiest way we've found is to get his or her peers to do this. And then you start measuring with visual management to show which managers are doing the best at that process. And nobody wants to have their name up on a board that shows they're at 0% or trailing the others. Gamify it. Find fun ways to be able to make change management happen across the organization. So rely on a team. And then ultimately, you're still going to need a support from executives. You're the leader. You're the one driving the change. But you want to be able to get the executive support to be able to participate and assist in this process, right? It's certainly broad-based across the organization, but if you have to battle other executives, you're going to need some executives on your team to support and fight those battles, because you alone as a PMO leader are not going to be able to fight an executive. So find your champions, find your team members that are at the executive level, and utilize them to help you gain acceptance as well. So hopefully that all makes sense for everybody. These are 30-minute webinars, so we're moving real quickly. So again, questions or comments, drop them into the chat. I think we'll have maybe a couple minutes at the end we'll be able to walk through. So what does this look like? Taking what we just talked about and moving it forward. Number one, you have to be a leader. We talked about that. Must be a leader, right? But you have to be a savvy and trusted leader. Folks through change are going to require trust in you and your capability and your team to get things done. But why savvy? Well, because you have to understand how the organization works. There's an organizational hierarchy that says who's in charge, but there's an informal hierarchy. There are certain influencers in the organization that they're the gatekeeper to really getting acceptance. If you don't know who those people are, if you're not savvy to understand the politics of the office and who the gatekeepers are, you're going to struggle. So you have to get trust and you have to understand how the organization works. The portfolio is at the organizational level now, right? You're serving the enterprise. So each department has to have representation in the portfolio. If you leave out a department and a group of projects, you're not going to gain their trust. Again, part of being a savvy leader is knowing when to include all of the parts of the organization. If one department resists, you haven't gained acceptance across the organization. So you have to be making sure that your organizational portfolio is inclusive of all the different departments. This is a huge one, right? What we want to be able to get to the point of performance evaluations, not of the project team, but of all teams across the organization. I'll give you an example. When I worked running a PMO in a healthcare organization at Wellstar Health System, on every employee's performance review at the health system, one of the items that we got graded on was washing our hands. And I said, I'm running the PMO. Why do I have a performance review item about washing my hands? Because it was cultural within the healthcare system that if we were in a healthcare setting, it was important. There was data that showed the amount of infections that were decreased by hand washing. So our bosses in the PMO evaluated us. Did we keep our hands washed at all times? That's the same mindset for organizational acceptance on project performance. If you're on a project team, your performance review should include your participation on your project work. And when that gains broad acceptance across the organization, you have won acceptance. Part of being a savvy leader, make friends in HR. Find a way to get performance reviews to include project work as part of the evaluations. We talked about training and make sure that that's in place at the organizational level, right? This is training to help people understand what we're doing. It's your opportunity to get people in a setting to talk about what we do. Use training as an advantage for you. In order to gain trust, you have to let people know you're working for them. Build a service catalog, right? Organizational project delivery is about the PMO offering a catalog of services that helps the organization deliver projects better. Everybody needs to know what services you provide. If you keep those close to the vest, you won't get the appeal that you need. You won't be able to build the trust you want. So ensure that you have a catalog and it's published. We talked about executives. It's great to have their support, but what you need to do is get their testimonials. When people can hear another executive talking about why they support what you're doing, it gives them that voice carries weight. It's so important to be able to get the testimonial, whether it's written, whether it's spoken, and utilize those testimonials to be able to advance your mission and your vision of what you're trying to accomplish at the organization. That's what it looks like. That's what you need to be able to accomplish. Last thing I've got on OPD here for today is time, right? You need to be savvy, you need to be trusted, but you also need to be patient. If you think this is going to happen in 6 months, you're wrong. If your boss wants it to happen in 18 months, they're wrong. Our research has shown us it takes 3 to 5 years for an organization to gain acceptance. It takes a long time for all of this change to happen, for people to trust you and the way you work and what you're going to deliver. If you set expectations up front, that this is a journey, and help people understand their place on that journey, you're going to get victories along the way, right? Moving from ad hoc to standardizing. Within standardizing, there's going to be victories. But let them know that if we want to get into strategic alignment and find the value of strategy execution, first we have to get everybody on board. We have to accept what we're doing, and that's going to take time. So go into that with eyes wide open and share that expectation with them so that you're not constantly fighting. Hey, when are you going to gain acceptance? When are you going to get there? Well, it's a we, it's not a me, it's a we will get there at the current time it takes, whatever that may be, most likely 3 to 5 years. So again, that's the fast walkthrough of going from resistance to acceptance. Obviously, in 30 minutes, we can't dig too deep into that, but that's what we're at. Here's a little bit more about the PMO squad, which you probably all are aware of, but we keep that there for your information so you know what we provide from a service perspective. And then ultimately, what questions do you all have?
Yeah, as Joe mentioned, that was let's just call it a fast track of stage 2 to stage 3, but open for questions now. So feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A. I'll kick off with one that we get commonly, I guess, just specifically about this stage. And more specifically organizational acceptance. But how does organizational acceptance differ from, let's say, executive support or executive buy-in? I think there's a clear difference there, but I think it's sometimes misunderstood.
Yeah. Yeah, executive support, obviously you want that from the beginning, and you may get some executives to support you. But again, in my example, back to my time at Wellstar, we would put out resource requests, and we literally would have one manager who she refused to review the PPM request and wouldn't accept them. So although we may have had executive support for what we were doing, the organization still didn't buy in. They weren't accepting our requests. So we knew we didn't quite have acceptance yet. They would then come back to us and wonder why resources weren't available for projects they wanted to work on. And we had to share because other departments were actually requesting and approving resources, and we were following a process. So internal departments were actually fighting one another over the ability to get resources because they didn't all buy into one way of working. So executive support can be useful, but it's not as useful as having acceptance of people following what the standard processes are.
Any
Other questions, comments, or thoughts? Thanks, Nathan, for the feedback. I appreciate
Thanks
it,
for
Merritt.
attending, Merritt. Awesome. Well, I'm going to put a link to the next webinar that we have on June 27th in the chat. It'll be Joe talking with Stuart Easton, another industry thought leader, around some of the, I'll say 3 key data points that came from the PMO research report. And I think Joe and Stuart have different opinions around what those statistics actually mean. So it'll be a lively discussion, we'll say. So hope to see everybody on that webinar on the 27th. And I guess watch your email inbox for this recording, as well as upcoming webinar invites for, let's just say, the next stage, which would be stage 3 to stage 4. So organizational acceptance to then becoming strategic in your project delivery. So that will be coming in the coming months. So watch your inbox for that. And in the meantime, thanks everybody for attending today, and have a great Friday and great weekend ahead.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
everybody.
weekend.